3 is about equations involving trig and solving those. When you're solving trig equations on one revolution of the unit circle, there are two answers for every trig equation. So the thing to keep in mind as you're finding both answers in the trig equation is that every one of your three basic trig functions are positive in two different quadrants. And this diagram, if you remember the saying, all students take calculus, following quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4, kind of helps you remember which ones are positive in which quadrant. In quadrant 1, all of the trig functions are positive because x and y are both positive in the first quadrant. In the second quadrant, sine is positive. Students starts with an S, helping you remember that sine is positive in the second quadrant. Or if you're better at just thinking about the ordered pair, in this quadrant, the y coordinate is positive, but the x coordinate is negative. The third quadrant is take. So T stands for tangent. Because cosine and sine are both negative, when you do y over x, tangent would be positive because a negative divided by a negative would be positive. And then the last one, all students take calculus. Calculus starts with a C, showing you that cosine is the only one that's positive in quadrant 4. Cosine is the x-coordinate. Quadrant 4, we're to the right of the origin, but we're below the x-axis, so sine is negative. And so that's one way to remember which ones you're looking for. So if I want my cosine values to both be negative, then I would use quadrants 2 and 3 because that's where cosine is negative. Okay, so these are some non-calculator problems. These ones you're asked to do without your calculator and because they are values on the unit circle. We want our answer to occur between 0 and 2 pi. 0 and 2 pi are radian measures, so we're looking for a radian answer. The first question asks for cosine equal to root 2 over 2. Root 2 over 2 is the one that is the 45-degree angle, or the pi over 4 in radians angle. And we want cosine to be positive, so that means we also want the one down here because that's when my x-coordinate would also be positive. So if I want a value between 0 and 2 pi, I want something that is pi over 4 less than 2 pi, so 7 pi over 4. So my two values are going to be x equals pi over 4 and x equals 7 pi over 4, just a little bit short of 2 pi. All right. The next one is tangent is negative root 3 over 2. So I'm thinking about the ones that involve a square root of, negative square root of 3 over 3. I'm looking for ones that involve a square root of 3. And because tangent is, tangent of theta would be sine over cosine, I want the cosine value to involve a square root of 3. So cosine involves square root of 3 when we're at pi over 6. Oh, but I don't want pi over 6 because that's in the wrong quadrant. I want tangent to be negative. So I want this value of pi to be pi over 6. So I want pi minus pi over 6, which would be 5 pi over 6. And then if I want tangent to be negative, I also want the one that's in this quadrant. So I want 2 pi minus pi over 6. That would be 11 pi over 6. So those are the two values where tangent is negative and cosine has root 3 over 2 as a value. So if I check that just to be sure I'm right, the y coordinate would be 1/2 when I'm in this quadrant, and the x coordinate would be negative root 3 over 2. If I divide those out, I get negative 1 over root 3. I have a square root of 3 in the denominator, so I do root 3 over root 3 to get rid of that square root of 3 in the denominator, and I get negative root 3 over 3. So that's the correct value. So my two values are x equals 5 pi over 6 and x equals 11 pi over 6. All right, secant is 1 over cosine. Oops, computer went crazy. Secant is 1 over cosine. So I put my x in the wrong place. And that's equal to -2. So I'm really looking for where is cosine of x equal to -1/2. And so I'm going to think about the unit circle. Cosine is 1/2 when I'm at pi over 3's. And I want cosine to be negative, so all students, oh, cosine would be negative here. Take, oh, cosine would be negative over here. Calculus, cosine is positive over there. Okay, so I want the pi over 3 value over here. So that would be pi minus pi over 3. That would be 2 pi over 3. So one of my answers is x equals 2 pi over 3. And the other answer would be the one in this quadrant. So I want 2 pi. Nope, not that quadrant. That's the wrong one. Sorry, that's where cosine is positive. I want cosine to be negative. So I want this value. So I want pi plus pi over 3. And that would be 4 pi over 3. Okay, cosecant would be 1 over sine. And that has to equal 1. So I'm looking for where sine of x is equal to 1. And if I'm on 0 to 2 pi, sine is equal to 1. Actually, only one spot on that value. So that would be x equals pi over 2. This one only has one value. So notice this note down here. For the reciprocal functions, first rewrite the equation as sine, cosine, or tangent. That's what I was doing when I was doing that. If you're on a calculator, you have a option on your calculator. So it's kind of like the way we blow up the sine house on the calculator is we're going to do sine inverse to get the opposite of sine. So we're blowing up that sine house by doing sine inverse of the 0.27. This sine inverse blows up the sine house and we get the x answer. This will only give us one value and we want two values. So we're going to figure out what quadrant we're in and then we're going to figure out how to get the other value. So I'm going to show you how to use your calculator to do this. In your calculator, you first need to click on mode and make sure that your mode is set to radians. We know these are radian measures because they're between 0 and 2 pi. So that's how we do that. And then we go second quit to get out of that mode, and we're going to do sine inverse, and I already forgot what the number was, so sine inverse of 0.27. And then we hit enter, and that gives us one value. It gives us 0.273. So one of the answers is 0.273, and that's going to be the value of sine in the first quadrant. Sine is one of the all, so sine is positive in the first quadrant, and sine is positive in the second quadrant as well because it's all students take calculus. So what we're going to do is we're going to do pi minus 0.273 to get the other value for sine. So on this calculator, I'm going to do pi minus, and I don't like retyping numbers, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit second ands, so I'm subtracting the answer from pi, and I get 2.868. 2.868 would be the other value of x. To try the other problems on this page, push pause, and when you are ready to check your answers, go ahead and push play on the video. So for 2b, we did cosine inverse of cosine of x to blow up that house. So we get x equals cosine inverse of negative 0.31. So on my calculator, I got that this angle, which is in quadrant 2, is 1.886. The other time that cosine is negative is going to be in quadrant 3. So I'm going to do 2 pi minus 1.866 in order to get the other angle. I want to point out on my calculator that maybe I wasn't 100% sure that that answer was correct. So I could check it by doing cosine of that angle to check to make sure that I get negative 0.31, and I did. So the two angles are going to be, are going to be 1.866 and 4.397 because those ones are in the correct quadrants. Again, with secant, we're going to want to rewrite that as a cosine equation. And with cotangent, we're going to want to rewrite that as a tangent equation. So I'm going to pause again and write up my solutions. The last two equations were reciprocal equations. So secant is 1 over cosine, which means that if secant of x is negative 4.339, cosine of x would be 1 over that. If I want to blow up the cosine house, I'm going to do cosine inverse on both sides. And so I get an angle that's in quadrant 2 because cosine is negative. The other time that cosine would be negative would be in quadrant 3. So I'm going to do 2 pi minus that angle. And then I get my two answers. So I'm going to just point out that I've done this problem and on my calculator here. And you can see that I was using that ands button so that I could so I could find my other angle. And then for cotangent, that means that tangent of x would be 1 over 1.5. So I blow up the tangent house using tangent inverse, and I get an angle that's in quadrant 1 because that's one of the times that tangent is positive. And so the one that's in quadrant 3, which is the other time that tangent is positive, all students take. So the t is tangent is positive. I'm going to add pi plus 0.588 to get my other angle. So we always want to check that we have two answers unless we happen to be at the very top or the very sides of the unit circle. Those ones only have one answer. All right. Good luck. Have fun. Talk to you later.